So Amelia's out pet sitting, so she's not home, which means I can film in the kitchen. This is a Panasonic bookshelf stereo. Now, if you're about my age, I'm 39. Weird saying that. I'll be 40 next year. Well, in May. Damn, I'm getting up there. If you grew up around the time I did in the 90s, early 2000s, 80s, late 80s, bookshelf stereos were pretty much in all of our bedrooms. If you had the room for a bookshelf stereo, you had one, and some kids had boom boxes. I had one of each. Bookshelf stereos are kind of my favorite guilty pleasure of consumer electronics because they do so much for such a small package. They're usually pretty well featured, and they weren't terribly expensive when they were new. I mean, these were stereos that pretty much everybody had in their house. Now that everyone is using Bluetooth speakers, Alexa, and nobody owns anything anymore, and we stream all of our music, these have kind of fallen out of favor. And but you can still buy a bookshelf stereo in 2023, but the options are really bad to horrible. They pretty much are just there to satiate the few people who buy the occasional CD or want to play their old CDs. Some of them even still have cassette decks, but most of them, the cassette deck location where the cassette decks were or would be, up until a few years ago, they would have been either an iPod dock or just a USB plug, or a place to place your phone, as most of them now have Bluetooth built in. This is a Panasonic from, I'm guessing, the early 2000s. I've actually been looking for a decent bookshelf stereo for our breezeway area for quite a while, and I usually find them at, I don't want to go on Facebook Marketplace or eBay and pay those prices. I'd rather see what's available, what trickles in at my local Savers. This just showed up at my local Savers, and I had to buy it. It was $13, and I don't know if it works. Didn't include a power cord, so I grabbed one from the basement and I plugged it in. I haven't actually plugged it into the outlet yet to see if it even turns on. But here are my predictions. The cassette decks will probably work because it's not so old that the belts would have been melted off. The 5-disc CD changer may not work. And I'm going to guess that the rotary encoder for the volume control is also bad. I want to point out one other thing. Rotary volume controls on bookshelf stereos come in two flavors. Either it's a rotary encoder, meaning it converts a rotary motion into digital pulses to determine how far and what direction you're turning the knob. Or some of the older ones had motorized volume controls because these included remote controls, and this one is of course missing, but it's not a big deal. I know where to find one. But the earlier remote controlled ones had a motor in the back of the volume control, and it was an analog knob. And the way to tell without even plugging it in which one you've got is if you can turn it in an infinite number of turns, and this one is obviously a rotary encoder. The problem is the rotary encoders on these were notorious for failing. I'm looking at you, Awa. Most of the ones that you find at Savers are going to have bad rotary encoders. And what's going to happen is when you turn the knob, the volume will go in random directions. It might not do anything at all. Sometimes it'll move up incrementally and then it'll jump or it'll stop. You can replace those. The rotary encoders are readily available from companies like Mouser or DigiKey, and they're not terribly expensive. But moving on, the 5-disc changers, the 6-disc changers were problematic in these units because they tended to jam up a lot, and they were very cheaply made. So what is the good in a bookshelf stereo? They're not terribly powerful. They don't sound the best, but they are convenient, especially the ones with the remote controls included or as optional, because you can pretty much just sit in your armchair, turn on the music, play a tape, switch to a CD without even leaving your chair. And again, they do have a lot of features that are kind of nice to have. You know, some of them have built-in equalizers. They're not great, but it's just, you know, it's a gimmick. A lot of it is gimmicks. As you get into the early 2000s and late 90s, the displays were fluorescent, vacuum fluorescent displays, and they would display all kinds of neat animations and all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm excited. I want to see if this thing works. Let's plug it in. Again, I don't have the remote for this, but they're not hard to find. So let's just plug it in. Sometimes you get, so we have AC in. Sometimes these will have a clock that comes up. Ooh, fancy shit. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. There's no disc in there. Let's see if the cassette deck opens. Oh, that's the CD. Okay, it's got one of the... All right, so that actually opens. Well, that's a good sign. So we've got 2 decks here. Both of them are single direction only. They're not auto reverse. You would know if they were because there would be 2 pinch rollers. This one has some heavy oxidization on that pinch roller or capstan. We can clean that up. You can see where it actually has 2 capstans on this one because this one would have, on another model, would have optionally been an auto reverse unit. So that indicates this is probably more of a later early 2000s model. Because the earlier models would have probably had auto reverse. That was a big deal to have. I'm not going to put a tape in these now that I know the condition those pinch rollers are in, or the capstans. Let's see. There might even be a disc in here. The good news is that CD changer is going through the motions. I think there's... Oh. We'll just cycle it through, see what it does. I love these displays. It's making the right noises. But I want to cycle through the whole thing before I start loading discs into it because I don't want it to jam up on me. Okay, disc 5. Another thing to note, so you don't want to transport these with CDs in them because they can become dislodged. So let's go ahead and switch over to disc 1. Another thing to note, this one doesn't have the optional audio input jacks here. So this is not the top of the line version of whatever series this is in, but there would be line in jacks here on the top tier model. I think it has some on the back though. Yeah, there is an auxiliary input in the back. So these are great for if you want to add an external Bluetooth module, you can do that. I'm considering modifying this with an internal Bluetooth module. I need to take it apart and see what that's going to look like. But let's put a couple of discs in there here. So we'll open up the CD changer. So the way the Panasonic changer works is you select the disc you want and then you put a disc in. And I'll have to get it apart at some point, maybe in another video, and we'll take a look at how this CD changer actually works. So I'm going to put a disc in there. Okay, so it loaded right up. Nice. Let's hit play. It is playing. But I can't turn the volume up because of copy protection. Okay, so we definitely confirmed that it does turn on, it works. CD changer seems to load and eject. Let's switch to disc 2. And then we'll see. This is my gripe with Panasonic's version of the 5-disc changer, because I actually had, around the year 2004, I had a bookshelf version, or a bookshelf Panasonic with the same changer in it, and it took forever to switch discs. I know it was the same changer because it clearly was. So I thought here, disc 2. And I should be able to just pop a disc in there. This is how slow it is, though. It's ridiculous. And now we just pop in a disc number 2. So now we have 2 discs in the magazine. There it goes. Yeah, I mean, so it uses the same, obviously, it uses the same laser mechanism regardless of what disc you're in. So the magazine system appears to be working just fine. And if I switched over back to disc 1, yeah, this thing is working pretty good. So in the year 2023, these do make pretty good garage stereos. I don't know whether this one's going to go in the breezeway or the garage, but it's going to go somewhere, and I haven't decided where yet. Let's see, let's get disc 2 out of there. Now we're going to go look at the cassette deck and see what kind of horrors lie within there. So the cassette deck mechanism is, let's take another look at it. So you've got 2 mechanisms in tandem, and one of them is a record and one of them is a play only. So this one is your record mechanism, and you can tell because it has an erase head right there. And this one does not. But yeah, I'm seeing a little bit of corrosion. I don't want to see corrosion on my pinch roller or capstan. I keep saying capstan when I mean pinch roller, but anyway. Let's take a look at that. That actually cleaned up pretty nicely, without really much effort at all. Too little effort, to be honest. So, let me just kind of brush away whatever. I mean, the pinch rollers could still use a little bit of love, but it's interesting how this one still has this vestigial capstan that isn't used because it's a non-auto reverse deck. Interestingly, and that's my playback deck. Okay, yeah. So the model above this would probably have, in a perfect world, it would have an auto reverse, at least one auto reverse deck. But again, I'm estimating the age of this machine to be sometime in the early 2000s, maybe like 2004 or 5. It actually works pretty well. Everything's working. All right, let's try deck 2. So I just figured out that this is your EQ control. And all the rotary encoders seem to work just fine. That is awesome. That is really awesome. So let's go ahead and stop it for a second here. I press the demo button. Now this is where all the fun stuff happens on these. This is how you know you're dealing with high-end shit. I think you have to hold this down. There it goes. Hello. Heavy. Clear. It just kind of goes. So when I was working for Walmart in 2002, 2003, we had a bunch of similar units to this, and we would have to display them with the demo turned on. And it was just eye candy, and people would buy these just because of this. You know? Not that many, but there were people that would, wow, this is impressive. It shows all this cool stuff, and wow, and holy crap. And maybe one of these days I should do a video on what it was like selling electronics from Walmart in 2002. We had if I recall, the video game consoles that we were displaying and selling were the PS1. That's PS1 spelled, that's the second gen. PlayStation 2. The GameCube. The original Xbox. Am I missing anything? Yeah, and the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. Yeah, those are the ones we were selling, and because I sold a lot of those to a bunch of bratty kids who didn't deserve them. But I was just the Walmart employee. I couldn't say, your kid's an asshole. You shouldn't buy him that. As much as I want. I'll tell you one story because this kind of like connects to the whole early 2000s. We had these two kids, right? And if I'm not mistaken, they were both in power chairs. I don't know what the story was behind that, but these kids were probably 10, 11 years old. The father was this very tall, redhead, overweight guy. I mean, he just looked like life had just kicked him in the ass. Every time he walked in our department with his kids, it was like life had just taken him, kicked him in the head with his boot, and just thrown him to the floor and just beat him senseless. This guy was the embodiment of defeat. And he had apparently done pretty well for himself because he would drop hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every time he'd walk through our department. The kids would be screaming at him, I want this, I want that. Rah! He'd be like, okay. And he'd grab his wallet and whatever they wanted, he'd buy it for them. And this poor guy, I just felt for him. It's like, oh my God. And I realize now that I'm probably now the same age he was back then. I kind of wonder whatever happened to that family. But every time they'd come in, it was like the guy just had this look of absolute, utter defeat. Like, somebody please hit me with a truck. I mean, back then I was in high school, and I'm like, oh my God, this poor guy. Is this what getting older, is this what becoming an adult is all about? Like, little did I know, right? But this guy would just, and his two kids, and they were assholes to him. Just absolute, they'd scream and holler, well, I want it. Yeah. It's like, if I had treated my parents, let alone my father, that way, I wouldn't have made it to 39. Now, did he feel for the kids because they were both in power chairs? Like they were disabled. I mean, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Was it because he felt guilty because they had to go through life with challenges that he didn't? Or was it because, I don't know. I don't know what the story was, but I do remember, like, he'd buy the kids a new game console every week or something. It was a lot of money, like money that I can't even imagine. Anyway, selling electronics at Walmart. Yes, ask me anything. Maybe I'll do a video on that, what that was like. I will say this though, I didn't hate my job. I actually enjoyed it. Well, of course it wasn't a career, it was just a job while I was in high school, but we did sell a lot of junk, and stuff like this was definitely on the menu over there at the Walmart. So, but the brands were different. See, that's another thing I want to bring up. This was not made by Panasonic. Didn't make this. Some OEM in China made this, or Malaysia. I think a lot of these are made in Malaysia. Let's double check. Prove me wrong. Made in, Matsushita Electric. Well, that doesn't mean it was made there, or by, where is it? Singapore. Okay, that was going to be my second guess. Made in Singapore. We are missing the loop antenna, but that's not a big deal. I've got a million of those. Still has the AM antenna, which is just a piece of wire. Actually, wait a second. Generally, yeah, okay, so it has, the FM antenna we have, it's the AM loop we're missing. That's okay. Those are easy enough to find, and I don't really listen to AM, so it's not a big deal. I'll fix that up. One of the things I like to do with these stereos, or actually with any speaker wire anyway, for that matter, is I like to cut the ends off, get nice clean wire, strip it back, and solder my pigtails on there because it just, looks better. Okay. Should we pull the cover off? What do you think? Let's do it. I'd look up the specs on this thing, but they really don't matter. Now, one of the great scams is these would be sold rated by peak power. So when you go down the aisle at Walmart, circa 2002, 2003, of course, or 2001, doesn't matter, whatever. You would see a bunch of these stereos, and they'd have in big bold letters, you know, on they used to come with like a paperboard printed sheet, you know, either it would stick on the top or be wrapped around the speakers, and it would say 300 watts, 500. We had some that said 500 watts. And I'm going to say some stuff that is factual because it happened. And what would happen is, and I just felt like I was in on this scam and I was part of it. But what would happen is around this time of year in New England, we would have seasonal apple pickers. And they would be bussed in from, I believe, either Mexico or Brazil or whatever. They used to come in, there were migrant workers, and they came in they actually toured, I believe, the entire, every apple or produce growing region in the country, and they would pick whatever was in season. And these poor guys would come in, and they would drop, at the end of the season, at the end of the picking season, they would come in by the busload, and they would clean us out of all of these stereos. And I couldn't speak Spanish, so I didn't know what they were saying exactly, but I could tell what they were discussing. And they look at these stereos, and to them, I mean, this was a big purchase, having one of these stereos in their house. And they would ooh and ah over the LEDs and they'd see the 300, and they knew what 300W meant. It's not like it had to be in a different language or anything. And they were like, oh my, you could tell they were just so enamored by this 300 watt, 500 watt. God, I swear some of them said 600 watts. And I didn't know enough, I didn't know any Spanish. So I couldn't say, by the way, that is peak, that is not what that's not, and they really thought that that's what it was putting out. Like, I mean, my God, RMS wattage is probably 20, 25 watts, maybe. And peak is probably 300 watts. I mean, they can't false advertise that. But my point is, it's like they didn't understand that, and most people did, not just the migrant farm workers, but we'd have people from around here. They'd look at this thing and they'd be like, "Hey, look at this! This one puts out 300 watts." It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Peak wattage is, rating these by peak wattage is just not, it's just not fair, They should be rated clearly by RMS. Anyway. Not RMS, root mean square. No, what am I saying? They should be rated by continuous output. And I think that's RMS actually. Whatever. I'm not smart. So this thing's cleaning up pretty good. I mean, look at that. Just a little bit of Windex and microfiber action here. This thing looks brand new. As good as it's ever going to look. Oh yeah, check this out. Detachable speaker grills. Look at the size of the look at the tiny little thing. Look at this. Now, okay. Wow, nice, big speaker. You take the cover off and it's just that. I mean, it's got some flex to it, but yeah, I remember every fall, at the end of the picking season, they'd get their paychecks, which I think they were paid in cash, and they would just blow it all at our Walmart. So my Walmart was located right down very close to a major apple picking area. The entire town next to us was just apple orchards. So if I go there right now today, I'm still going to see a lot of those migrant apple pickers. And they would spend all of their money at our Walmart. The first thing they would buy is a stereo. It was like a major source of pride for them. I guess where they're from. I guess they just don't have the either it costs more, or I think that's what it is. It's cheaper to buy them here in the States than it is in Brazil or Mexico or wherever they're from. Colombia, maybe. I don't know. But I know everything is everything is triggerable these days. But no, that's really what happened. I was there. I saw it, you know. And I asked at the time, I had asked my manager, I said, you know, like, what is going on here? Because I just saw all of a sudden all of these folks, you know, they were clearly farm workers. And I'm like, why are they buying up all this garbage that we're selling them? And it was explained to me that, yes, that's what they do. They, you know, they might, I mean, they're probably not spending their entire earnings on a stereo, but they do buy a lot of these stereos, and they just, whatever. It keeps the economy going, I guess. Somebody's got to buy them, right? But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the one I had as a kid, because, I mean, you know, I had a bookshelf stereo, not dissimilar from this one. So I got mine, ironically, my first bookshelf stereo I got for my 12th birthday at a Circuit City in Nashua, New Hampshire, that happens to be a Sabres, which happens to be where I bought this. It's all goes full circle. So I got mine. It was a birthday gift, and I got to pick it out. And it was a Sharp with a single CD, a single cassette. Didn't sound nearly as good as this. This thing actually sounds pretty good. I bet you these are real tweeters. I'll talk about that in a second too. We'll get to that. So this one has real tweeters in it. Mine didn't have that. It just had two very poor quality speakers. Wow, that cleaned up nice. Hey. So mine was a Sharp 3-disc CD, single cassette, full Logic control with remote. It was from 1996, and it was I had it for a number of years. No auxiliary input though. It was kind of on the lower end, you know. But it worked really well for what it was, and it didn't sound great, but it was good enough for a 12-year-old kid. But yeah, I literally bought it from what is now the Sabres, because it was Circuit City back in the day. I kind of wonder if that's where this came from. So let's talk a little bit more about the hallmark features that you're going to find in your typical 90s or early 2000s bookshelf stereo. So one of the things that they're notorious for is fake speakers. So, wait a second. I don't think this one had the optional remote. This is where the sensor would be, I think. Hold on. There is a way to tell. If I take a flashlight. Okay, it actually does have a window there. You can't really see it unless you put a light up to it. But there's a window, and you can see a sensor back there. So what I was getting at is speakers. Okay, so these are real speakers. Okay, every part of the speaker is functional. You've got your tweeter or high frequency, and you've got your mid-range bass, whatever you want to call it. A lot of these had, and Sony was really guilty of this. I remember there would be one speaker and then not a resonator, but what would you call that? There's a name for them. But it was really all it did. So the speaker box was sealed. So the actions of one speaker would create differences in pressure in the cabinet. And then you would have a, I want to say resonator, but that's not the right word. It was really just a dummy speaker. And it actually had suspension. Like it had a surround. It moved, and it moved with this speaker on the bottom. But it wasn't an actual speaker. It was just God, what is it? Somebody put it in the comments. A lot of these bookshelf stereos had that, especially Sony. And I think the Philips, because we were selling Philips at the time too. You also had a couple of fake tweeters. Now, fake tweeters have been around forever. It would look like a tweeter, but it was just a piece of foil with some plastic to make it look like a tweeter. But they didn't do anything, did nothing at all. Then you've got all of those fancy bass ports. Sony had one. It had looked like a PVC pipe sticking out the top. And it was just very gimmicky. This one, I think on the gimmick scale, this one's pretty low. It doesn't have any useless features on it. I mean, okay, useless is relevant, but everything on this stereo is functional. Like, it actually has a purpose. But when you started to get into the later, like towards the very end of the bookshelf stereo generation, things got really wacky. One I want to point out is honorable mention. So the Philips stereos that we had, some of them had fake VU meters. I mean, they kind of worked, but they weren't really there. They were just there for show. It had an orange dial right over here, it was a VU meter, but it was just there for show. I mean, it worked. It would move with the sound. I mean, now in the early 2020s, like the one my dad just bought for his garage is an RCA. Of course, RCA has been dead for decades, but it has RGB lighting in the speakers. It's funny. My dad's like this super conservative guy, and he's very conservative and he's very old-fashioned in a good way. And in his garage, he's got this RCA stereo. He just bought it, and it's like pink and purple, and it's changing color, and he's listening to like local news radio. It's funny. It just makes me laugh. Okay. Let's find out how old this thing is. I actually am curious. I'm thinking I'm gonna guess 2002, and then we're gonna take it apart. We're gonna take a look inside. I'm not gonna break anything. I'm not gonna do any work. I'm just want to see what it looks like internally, and we'll go from there. All right. What did I say? 2002 was my estimation. I was almost dead on. The manual, I found the manual for this, and it was copyright 2001, June of 2001. So 2002 is about right. Output power on this unit, I believe, is peak 60 watts per channel. I think that was 60, maybe half that, actually. Hold on. Yeah, 60 watts per channel peak, if I am correct in that assumption. So, I think 45 watt RMS, maybe 60 watt peak. Now, the SA-AK12 is the bottom end, and that's what I was thinking, the bottom end of its line. So there are better versions of this out there in the wild. This is the budget grade version. And typically, stores like Walmart would sell the budget version. You go to Best Buy and you'll get the higher end model. So one thing to consider when buying any electronics like this from places like Savers, really, or used, just generally used, it's not a bad idea to take it apart anyway, just to take a look for things like cockroaches. Just saying, not a bad idea. I'm actually I'm kind of impressed. So made June 2001 on that main board. So that, hey, how accurate was I, right? Really not much. So this one is, okay, when you open up a lot of these bookshelf stereos, especially the new ones, there's not a lot in there. Usually it's just a board in the front. I mean, I don't mean to disappoint anybody, but typically you're going to find just the board in the front, maybe a little power block, a transformer, a couple of cassette decks in there. The biggest thing inside of these is typically the CD player, which on my old 3-disc unit was up on the top. It was a drawer style. This one uses a magazine, so it's compact and crammed in the bottom. But you don't typically see all of this stuff in here. What do I mean by that? Well, the amplifier is usually tiny, and so tiny, in fact, that they don't really require a heatsink. Now, look at this one. This thing is all heatsink. Look at that. It's massive. There's our transformer right there. I'm going to grab some compressed air. We'll blow the dust out of this. Oh, sorry. Kitty don't like that. I would have to do some invasive surgery to kind of get a better look at the... But look, there's our amplifier chip down there. See it? It's pretty big. I mean, physically, it's large. So maybe our power ratings are a little bit conservative. Now, it's also good to point out that this is a generation of electronics where you're going to find leaking capacitors. So I just did a quick visual check looking for domed or blown up caps. I didn't see any. That's actually quite impressive. On the bottom, yeah, we have our CD mechanism. It's big. Now, the ones that I find in car stereos are way more compact and they're faster. But something like this is probably less likely to malfunction. I did say that, you know, those multi-disc changers, that the compact ones, the drawer style, I'm sorry, the magazine style units are more likely to fail than the rotary changers that you find on some of the lower end units or even older units. But I'm actually not, I'm not disappointed with what I'm seeing in here. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not looking at it, from an, I just whacked my elbow on this. That hurt. I'm not looking at it from the perspective of an engineer because that's not what I am. But someone like EEV Blog, forget his real name. But anyway, you know, he could look at this and say, "Oh, look, it's a Jolly Baba gig," you know, whatever. Love his videos, but he could look at it from an engineering perspective and say, you know, they shouldn't have used that. They should have used this. And why did they do this? And holy crap, this is a Bob's your uncle. If you've ever seen Triple EV Blog, Double EV Blog, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you should watch him. A little bit of shielding there. It looks like a single motor mechanism. So there's one motor driving two mechanisms, which is not uncommon. That is pretty typical. So there's one long ass belt, or maybe more than one long belt in there. So when one cassette deck is moving, the other one is actually still rotating. Like the pinch roll, or the cap stand is rolling, even though nothing's engaged. But that is a big heatsink for such a cheap stereo. Maybe this is a little bit higher end than your Sharp, your RCA, your Philips, you know, probably a little bit on the higher end side, a little more money than what you would spend on one of those. But it looks like, I mean, I did listen to it without the camera rolling and I was actually not disappointed. It does sound clear and it does have a little punch to it. So it's definitely better than the one I had as a kid. But I have had better as an adult. So there's our fuse. Let's see. It's never a blown fuse, by the way. You ever see a blown fuse in one of these? Do your homework. Do your due diligence. It's never just a blown fuse. I cannot emphasize that enough. A lot of people think that, oh, I'll just replace the fuse. If you're going to do that, you know, don't jump the fuse. Put the same rating, or even a lower rating fuse, lower rated fuse than what it calls for. Because if there is a short or something horribly going wrong inside, it's going to blow again. And one of my earlier videos, I actually proved that point. So I had a VCR, got it from I think Savers probably, and I open it up and the fuse is blown. I'm like, it's never just a fuse. I don't even know if I said that, but I know that. So I jumped it. Let's see what happens. I didn't really care if it blew up or not. Sure enough, sparks everywhere. It's never just a fuse. Remember that. It should be tattooed. Somebody needs to do one of those cross-stitch, you know, those things that, you know, like my grandmother used to make. It's never just a fuse with little, you know, little designs on it. Somebody make one for me and send it. I'll pay you. Just kidding. I won't pay you. But okay, I think we're good here. I mean, everything looks pretty clean. There's not a lot. There's no corrosion. There's no caps have lost their guts everywhere, which is what you'll typically find with something like this. They're not Nichicons. It's got Capzon caps in it. Those are pretty low. I mean, they're not junk, but they're lower end. I see some Elnas too. I use a lot of the I use Elnas, Panasonics, and mostly those are the two big ones that I buy from Mauser for my business. So there's your main amp chip, and then these over here, those are just probably for power regulation. I don't know, not an engineer. I don't pretend to be one, but it's definitely full of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here. June 2001. Yeah, that sounds about right. Let's put it back together. Let's see if I got that right. So if I turn it off, the clock should stay on. No, not even if it's set. There's got to be a setting in the owner's manual. The SA-AK12 has auto reverse. So that, you know. Would have been nice to find the SA-AK12 just for Providence, but I'll take this one. The clock on this unit surprisingly does not remain on. It only stays on for 5 seconds. It does not have an option, apparently, for full on all the time. That's lame, but, you know, what are you going to do? This is where it's going to live. Slowly cleaning up this breezeway. Got to get rid of the cat house that I made. They don't like it. There it is, the Panasonic 5-disc SA-AK12 dual cassette stereo. Pretty happy with this find. I think it's going to be a nice little radio out here. I may or may not add Bluetooth to it. We'll see. I probably should just, at least, you know, at a minimum, I can actually use an external module, which isn't really a big deal. So, okay. Till then, guys.